Oncologist here, Dr. Dan.
Okay, hey. It says I'm live. We'll find out. I gotta get my iPod, but hopefully we're live and you'll be able to see all this on the YouTubes. All right. So
I wish I had brought my book.
there we go. I'll be right back.
No, I have my regular book that I keep on this.
You mean your kitty litter or what?
Keep on my.
They're doing exposure-directed radiation, right, with the big fancy machine?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep, he's already marked and they said, don't scrub him off.
You got a
I
tattoo?
won't.
You got a tattoo?
Yeah, all the little X's, but she put these little round things over top of it so I can't wash them off.
Nice.
Was this with permanent marker then?
Yeah,
Or is
it's permanent
Oh, see,
marker.
Renee got a real tattoo.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sometimes
She
you
got a
tattoo
real
it.
one.
Oh, yeah. What they did here is they just used a red marker and lines and stuff, and then she put these little plastic
If I'm right
discs over top of them so that you can't wipe it off.
Yeah, she's got a dot, I don't remember where it's at.
So when we're-
One on her arm, a dot here or somewhere.
And then the machine's already set up. All he does is he lays down and it'll adjust right to where those markers are. And she'll zap him and we get to go home.
It'll open the iris in the
That's it.
machine and the beam will turn on.
Couple
Yeah.
seconds. All it takes, and then we get all that going over there and everything for like 2 seconds. Then we
Yep.
get to go home.
That's all right.
Well, it's a lot better.
Sorry,
than
I'm still looking for my
61,
iPad.
Yes, it is.
When they actually exposed your whole body to the source and everything.
Right.
Oh,
We
no,
don't do that anymore.
Yeah, that was a real rough treatment for radiation. They irradiated the whole individual.
She said the only sad part of where it's located, the radiation is gonna go through the back because there's no way of getting it.
Yeah, they can't turn the angle to miss the spinal column.
No.
So
So she says, just don't fall down.
I had to go to Rochester yesterday, and they checked my leg,
Yeah, Yeah.
X-rayed it all, and they said it looks perfect. And they said, they want me to take that rod that's in my leg out,
Did you go downstairs?
and I go, I ain't taking that rod out of my
No,
leg.
no.
Oh.
no.
And he
because
said,
you don't heal.
and then, you know, this doctor that I had, he's the best doctor I've ever had in my whole, this dude, he
want me to go
he
in?
come in and he sat down right beside me. He come right
That's
right
like
here, we
Dr.
were doing
Dan.
this,
Yeah,
right here, and he explained everything that it, so this 2-year-old brain that I got, I could understand.
Yeah.
And he said they've done a fancy study on that, on infection, and I, you know, might have a little problem with infection once in a while. Just like,
no kidding.
yeah,
just a little bit. And, but he said, you have a 20% chance, if you leave it in, you'll have a 20% more of a chance. Basically, it's just, you got a 80% chance that you won't get infection in there.
Yeah.
But if you take it out, which this is hard for me to believe, because you're cutting me open again, and you're
Yeah.
thinking you're gonna open it up more to, but they said you have almost a 0 chance if you take that rod out of there of getting infection in it.
That makes no
I
sense.
don't know.
And I go, dude, I ain't taking it out.
No, because I get
You have a
infection all the
100%
time.
chance of being in a lot of pain.
Yeah, well, yeah.
For almost,
See, it doesn't, it's
true.
not that bad. It's compared to the first time, it's nothing compared to that.
Yeah.
Because I've had it in and out 3 times now, so.
they don't plan on re-breaking the bone or anything.
No.
They're just gonna pull the
Well,
rod
and
out.
then he said the other thing too, it is perfectly healed now, so if it don't have infection in there, all they gotta do is just go reach in there with a
Where's your glasses, baby?
vice grip and rip it
I
out
don't
of
need
there.
them. That's why.
That's what they did to the 3 going through my arm. They just took them on the outside, grabbed hold of them and pulled them back out.
That's the joy of using the iPad is I can make the
Mine
print as
were
big as I want.
Stuck out externally.
Yeah.
Okay.
that Zoom helps.
All right. Everybody's got a sheet. We're back to Jude. Hi, everybody. I'll edit out that beginning there. Me running around trying to find my iPad until Lisa said, "Oh, hey, is it downstairs?" Sure enough, there it was. All right. Okay. So we're moving on in the book of Jude and do a quick review. Who wrote Jude? Anybody remember? Hey, Jude. Hey, Jude.
Jude.
Don't flag this post just because I'm singing
John-
a Beatles song. John wrote Jude?
No, Jude wrote Jude.
Jude wrote Jude.
Jude wrote Jude, really?
Right, but who's Jude?
Jude.
Jesus' brother.
Right, Jesus' brother, right?
Oh,
He calls
that's
himself
why.
Jude, the brother of James. James is the brother of Jesus, and so it's Jude, the brother of Jesus. But he doesn't want to use that just to establish his authority, so he says he's brother James. And then he told us why he is going to write it. Does anyone remember why he was writing it? Remember, he said originally he wanted to write them something about the gospel, but then he felt it necessary to what?
Well, how sharp our memories are.
Remember?
No.
Okay.
Wished I'd have brought my notes.
He said he was going to write so that he could contend for the faith once and for all delivered to the saints, because infiltrators had come into the church and they were not good people. They were leading people astray. Does anybody remember what defined those people who were the cause for writing the letter? He said they particularly did two things. Anybody remember that? I must be the world's poorest Bible teacher. Because I don't
No.
remember anything.
I got my notes.
No, what did they do? What is it, Shelby?
I don't. Oh, I'm on there.
I can't read my writing.
What did they do?
There we go.
I had that trouble in Sunday school class. It's terrible. I write down all my.
It says
Sexual
that
immorality?
they perverted God's grace
Mhm.
into sensuality, and then they denied Jesus. Okay. And so he's going to move on now. We're going to pick up, that was the first 4 verses. We're picking up in verse 5, which is on your sheet. He says, "Now I want to remind you, although you once fully knew it, that Jesus, who saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. And the angels, who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desire, serve as an example by undergoing a punishment of eternal fire." Okay, so Jude says he wants to remind us of something. And then he gives 3 examples, right? What's he trying to remind us about?
God has wrath.
Yeah. God will judge, right? God has wrath. He will judge disobedience. Because he's given us 3 examples of God bringing forth judgment. Okay, three different examples of judgment. He's going to judge disobedience through these 3, and he gives these 3 historical incidents of judgment. Why do you think he would say that? Something like, "I want to remind you, and you once knew it." I'm going to remind you of this
Well,
about God's judgment. Why would he say that?
a lot of the generation dies.
Okay.
And the stories don't continue to get told.
Okay, that's one possibility. Stories don't continue to get told.
And
Okay.
if they're perverting God's grace.
Right, I say, remember in the context of the letter, they're perverting God's grace and they're denying Jesus. What's one of the ways false teachers tend to pervert God's grace?
Do what feels good.
It feels good, man. You just, God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life. And it's all going to be just fine.
He won't judge.
He won't judge you. God doesn't judge anybody.
No, he loves everyone.
God just loves you so much. He would never judge anybody, right? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they never read the Old Testament.
God is
Well,
love.
and which is exactly Jude's point, because he cites 3 examples from the Old Testament that completely are counter, right, to what those teachers would teach, or what people in our generation even tend to. You hear this all the time, right? The whole everything. Years ago, I remember this book came out by this guy who was a pastor named Rob Bell. Now, Rob Bell was on the fast track to being super pastor mega dude, right? He pastored a church in, I think it was Grand Rapids, 3,500 people, this church. And he wrote this book called Love Wins. And the book was basically, there is no hell. God loves everybody. Love wins. No, and that's the thing. He's a universalist. And now he's not even a believer. He's some sort of weird apostate ridiculousness.
I'm
But
pretty sure he wasn't a believer then either.
well, possibly not. But my point is that that's for another Bible study. My point simply being that that's a very common belief. You run into this all the time. Well, if God loves people, he'd never judge them. He'd never punish them.
Yeah.
But Jude's going to counter that, and he gives us 3 examples. And the first one is in verse 5, right, which is the disobedience of Israel when they're entering the promised land. Now, this comes from Numbers chapter 13, verses 1 through 38. Anybody remember that story? Do I need to read it, or do you want me just to summarize it for you?
Go ahead, whatever you
I'll
want.
summarize. It's a long story. People leave Egypt, right?
Mhm.
Cross the Red Sea, da 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 da. And then they wander around the desert, right, for a while, like a year. Water out of the rock, manna, all this great stuff, right? And they come, and it's time to enter the promised land. So what do they do before they enter the promised land? Everybody remember?
Send out.
Right? They scout it. They send out some spies, right? 12 spies. The spies go into the land, right? And they run around and everything, and they come back, and what do the spies tell Israel?
11 of them tell them it's not worth it.
Was it 10, right?
10, too.
Yeah, 10, okay.
Right. All except Caleb and Joshua, right? But the other 10 are like, ooh, there be big giants over there. Oh, yeah, that's really scary. And people are scary. And Joshua and Caleb are like, everybody's afraid of us. We should go in right now, take over the land.
Right.
The other people are like, no, it's really scary. And so what happens?
So they don't do it.
Right, yeah. They brought back food and all sorts of stuff, right? Met Rahab, who's in the line of Jesus.
Wander around for 40 more years.
Right, and so what happens? The people decide, no, we ain't gonna do it. God gets a wee bit perturbed with Israel and says, fine, if that's the way it's gonna be, you won't go in. And you're gonna wander for 40 years until everybody in this generation is dead.
Good Moses.
And then it wasn't Moses' decision, it was
No, I know,
God's.
but- Yeah, no, I meant, but not believe in just making them go.
He couldn't make them go in. They weren't gonna go.
That's
They
true.
believed the report of the bad report. And so everyone except Caleb and Joshua had to die before they could go into the promised land.
40
Okay.
years.
40 years. Now what's amazing, okay, I think in their refusal to obey God here is they had literally just spent the entire year getting rescued out of Egypt, getting fed magically, and all these other amazing miracles happen, right? All sorts of miracles.
So the sea was parted.
Yeah.
rock, I mean,
All amazing stuff, right? And then they're like, "Ooh, but the giants, the giants in the land, right?" And they're very rare men, giants in the land, because the remnants of the Anakim still existed at that point. So anyway, that's also for another Bible study. Okay, but if anybody should have obeyed, they should have obeyed.
Yeah,
Okay,
they saw
so
those
God
miracles.
judges them, right? The spies immediately die. The rest of them have to wander for 40 years. Okay. So what is
about
the?
you, but after all the spies just died, I'm
Yeah.
like, we're going in.
Yeah, it's too late by then though.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are you? No, why would I want a spearmint one?
I think peppermint ones are hot.
Don't eat
Listen,
Then don't eat them.
well, I was gonna give you an experiment.
I don't want your nasty
There's a guy
spearmint.
that could probably breathe fire if he wanted to.
Right. Okay. Here's the thing. Had the Israelites grumbled in that year in the wilderness?
Yeah.
Right? And yet, God would feed them, or God would get them water, or God would do whatever,
Mhm.
right? But now,
God's upset.
God's had enough. Right? At this point, God has had enough. And I think the lesson here, God can only be pushed so far. God is gracious. He's long suffering, yes. Right? Peter talks about how he wants everybody to repent. He's full of mercy, but he has limits. Transgress those limits at your own risk. So I think that's the lesson of Israel here. That's the first one. Questions?
So we should always do what God tells us to do.
You definitely should always do what God tells you to do. And you should also do what your pastor tells you to do, especially if it's your son.
Do you think it's normal though that we still have trouble? Like, okay, let's say something bad happens to me and I'm like, oh no, how am I going to get through this? But I can look back and see all the times that God has gotten me through before,
Right.
you know? So kind of like them.
It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. What I always think is funny is we always think we'd be different.
Oh, no.
Or not.
Yeah.
We always, that's the thing. We always, oh, well, I would have been different. I'd have been like Caleb and Joshua.
Yeah.
Probably not. That's the thing. And that's part of the great lessons of all these things, right? It's like the story in the New Testament Jesus tells, right? About the tax collector and the Pharisee, and they go, and the Pharisee's like, oh, thank you, God, that I'm not like other people, and I tithe, and I'm so great, and I'm God's gift to God. And I'm not like this tax collector over here. And the tax collector's over there like, God, have mercy on me. I'm a horrible sinner. I'm the cruddiest sinner ever that's lived. Okay. And everybody reads that story and goes, yeah, that tax collector, he's awesome, man. He's awesome. Nobody ever seems to get that. The point of the story is we're just like the Pharisee. We're not like the tax collector. We're like the Pharisee. We're like, man, I am so glad. I'm so glad that I'm not like those drug addicts over there. I'm so glad I'm not like those people that they're just whatever, you know, they don't want to do this, or they're bad people or whatever. I'm so glad I'm not like those super liberals over there because they're so whatever. Yeah, that's just what we're like. Well, I'm so glad I'm not like them. The point of the story is we're the Pharisee. Yeah. In that case, not that we're the tax collector. So anyway, so back to this. All right. So let's go to verse 6, because I love verse 6. Where he says, and angels who do not stay with their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he's kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Well, now isn't that an interesting thing to say?
Yeah.
Disobedient angels. Now, when he says that, right? You know, he doesn't go, oh, well, this is such and such an incident that happened, blah, blah, blah. When he tells the story, it has to be something the readers would know, right? Because he gives you very little information to go on.
He's expecting that you know.
He's expecting that they know exactly what he's talking about, right? Okay. So it can't be some sort of generic fall of Satan type story or something like that, because he's very specific, right? These angels, they left their proper abode, their proper dwelling. The word there is like their proper realm of where they're supposed to function. And as punishment for whatever they did, God has locked them away. Okay, so whatever they did must have been really bad, right? Because God's already locked them away. So they couldn't cause any more problems. So the only story in the Bible that fits this
Pretty well.
is found in Genesis
That's right.
chapter
Where they took
6.
humans as wives.
Yeah.
Right. It says, when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. And also afterwards, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. And the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of his thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted he'd made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I'll blot out man whom I've created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I'm sorry that I've made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. According to the old Tennessee Ernie Williams song.
So
You
at,
remember that?
so at that time, angels still had free will.
Whoever said angels don't have free will now?
So you don't think God took that free will away from the angels?
Do you have a chapter and verse you can cite for me on that?
No.
Very good. Okay.
He wants to obey him.
Huh?
He wants me to obey him.
Okay.
Okay.
So there are traditionally two interpretations of this verse, of this passage. Okay. One of them is called the sons of Seth interpretation. And the idea there is that when it talks that whoever is being talked about there, okay, that is with the daughters of men, the sons of God, were the line. Remember, Adam and Eve had two boys at first, right? Cain and Abel. Cain's a rotten dude. Abel's not. And then she has another son afterwards. After Cain slays Abel, Cain is banished, and then he has Seth. Okay, and if you look at the genealogies, the idea is the line of Seth is the line of godly people who follow God, and the line of Cain, of course, is the line of naughty people or whatever. Okay, and so the idea here is that the righteousness and the evil people have been basically separated, and now they were mingling again, and this made God angry because all the line of Seth got corrupted, and they got all nasty and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's one. Now, that is not the more traditional interpretation, which I would take, which is that when it says sons of God here, it is talking about some form of spirit being. We typically tend to use the word angels. I would argue that angels is just a job description of certain spirit beings. And so, but nonetheless, that somehow these spirit beings either took on flesh or possessed men or something. They somehow were able to cohabitate with women and create offspring, which were very powerful. Okay? This idea of the Nephilim and that sort of thing. Now, the key here to understanding this passage, I think, what drives my interpretation is the use of sons of God. The phrase sons of God only occurs in the entire Old Testament 6 times, twice in this passage. One time, it occurs in Deuteronomy 32:8. It is clearly talking about the Israelites. Okay? More than likely, it's talking about the Israelites, although there it could also be angels. But the other 3 times, when it occurs in Job, it is clearly talking about spirit beings. Okay? And the Deuteronomy 32:8 one could even be spirit beings. But anyway, point being, sons of God is a reference to spirit beings. Okay? There's no reason to somehow, the only reason people come up with this sons of Seth interpretation is because they can't stomach this possibility that at least at some time in the past, that somehow spirit beings and human beings interfaced in such a way that they had children. But this was clearly, if that's what happened there, that certainly fits the description of Jude of angels or spirit beings or whatever you want to call them, leaving their proper realm, right, and doing naughty things. Now, there's another passage that we need to consider, and that is in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 19 and 20. So let me go there real quick. 1 Peter chapter 3, down to verse 19. Okay. Is it 19 and 20? Is it 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 9? Maybe I got the wrong verse there. No, there's only... Well, now I lost where that passage is. I hate it when I do that. Typos are bad. Okay, for the powers subjected to him. Or will he bad person you? I hate it when I make a typo. Yeah. Christ suffered. Oh, here we go. Yeah, verse 9. Okay, that was the right verse. I'm just looking at it wrong. Okay, so it's talking about Christ, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey when God's patience waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. Okay, so there he talks about spirits in prison in the days of Noah, okay, when the ark is being prepared. Now, what is particularly important to understand is in the New Testament, every time you see spirits, plural, it's always referring to some sort of spirit beings, angels, basically. It's not talking about our spirits.
Right.
So there's these spirits in prison, okay? When are the spirits in prison? They were in prison when? In the days of Noah. Well, what happens right after the whole events of Genesis, first part of chapter 6, right? God goes, you know, this place is a disaster. I think we're going to wipe it. And then how does that first section end? But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Okay. So here, Peter tells us about these spirits in prison. Jude talks about them, you know, these spirits being imprisoned. And so whatever happened in Genesis 6 resulted in these spiritual beings being imprisoned, okay? Now, this is also supported by another book that is not in our Bible, okay, called First Enoch. And remember Enoch, right, from Genesis? Enoch's the guy that it says Enoch walked with God and he was not, for God took him, right? Which we take to mean he didn't die. God just sort of did an Elijah on him and translated him to heaven. Right, because that's what happens to Elijah also.
That's what we call that now.
What?
Doing an Elijah.
Doing an Elijah. Right. But you got to do the spirit fingers.
That's nice. I like that. That's a
Right.
good touch.
Thanks. The spirit fingers. Right.
I know because.
Those aren't spirit fingers.
Fingers.
But anyway, in chapter 5 of First Enoch, which would have been a book some people in the first century would have been familiar with, okay, because that literature was circulating at that time, even though it's not in the Bible. It has stories that would have been common among the Jewish people of that time. And in chapter 5 of First Enoch, it talks about Genesis chapter 6 and has a more detailed description of this idea that angels came and had babies with human females, and they became these giants and blah, blah, blah. And God looked at the whole earth and was like, whoa, this really has gotten off the rails, and sends the flood. Okay.
I guess speaking of the flood, quick
Mhm.
stupid question.
Right.
Them people that took on the spirit, whatever they were,
Mm-hmm.
did they drown then in the flood?
Oh, did they drown in the flood? Yes.
Well, that's what I figured,
But-
because they took on humans. They're kind of took on.
Okay, now you're really taking me on a rabbit trail that I really desperately want to go down.
All right, do it.
Okay.
I can't help it. That's
So these being, this is, I'll get off a little bit on a rabbit trail and then we'll go back.
just go fast.
Okay, so you have these hybrid beings that are part angelic being and part human, right? And they're killed in the flood, but their spirits remain.
That's what I was gonna say, you can't kill the spirit.
Okay, and where are their spirits now?
In prison?
Well, no, the ones who did the original cohabitating are in prison.
Yeah.
But what about the spirits of the children that were killed in the flood? Where are those spirits?
Yeah, but you would
I'd say in him.
think.
No.
No.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Whenever Jesus encounters a demon in the New Testament, where's the demon?
He
Inside
goes
a
to somebody,
person?
where?
Inside somebody, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, when he casts them out, does he not sometimes cast them into animals or whatever, right? Like the story with the pigs, right? Okay. Because what? Those spirits of what we call demons, which traditionally are taught as they are fallen angels. I disagree with that. I do not believe demons are fallen angels. Demons are the spirits of the dead Nephilim. That's why they constantly want to inhabit flesh. They are used to being
In a body.
in a body.
Human before they died.
Yeah. And so they are constantly
That is a
trying to,
rabbit trail, ain't it?
Yep. they are constantly trying to get back into a body.
That's what I was taught to.
So
Yeah.
they're not fallen angels.
No.
They are these spirits. And that's why they're, because where in the scriptures do angels ever go around trying to inhabit human bodies? That doesn't happen.
No.
Don't need to.
Now,
In fact,
now,
most angels, when you see them, they're scary.
so these angels that left their realm,
Right.
they actually had to possess someone in order to propagate.
I am not saying that they necessarily did.
It's, no.
We don't know.
Okay.
However they did or whatever they did, God was upset with them enough that he put them in eternal, he put them in the place that we know from the book that we call the abyss.
Right.
And they will be released someday in the end
those are the
times.
real bad ones.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I
Right.
suspect they didn't have to inhabit anyone. That's why we're told that sometimes we see angels and don't realize they're
That's
angels.
possible.
Because they can take a
Right.
form that's not the scary form that they normally.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
That's right.
So-
They probably wouldn't have to possess anybody because they're going to be let loose at the end of time.
Right. Okay. So I don't want to go down that trail too far. I want to ask though, what do you think the lesson is there?
Don't get possessed.
Okay, yeah. Stay away from demons. That's
Don't do
definitely
things that's going to let a demon in.
okay.
And don't get a mean dog, because it might
No.
have an evil spirit in it.
That's right.
I'm
No,
my dog just has the spirit of craziness.
I know, but she's such a sweetheart.
Is
She
hunger
couldn't
a
be a
spirit?
demon.
I have that spirit.
Because my
Spirit
dog
of
has
hunger.
that spirit.
Yeah.
I tried to take a nap today, but all I heard was her barking at the stove.
There
I
you
had
go.
onions on it. That was all there was.
Yeah. She would have ate them though. The whole thing.
And I think the lesson here, okay?
Yeah.
The first lesson is God's got limits, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
The second lesson is it doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
God will punish you. No one is outside the realm if they're disobedient of being punished. Okay, it doesn't matter who you are. I mean, these were spirit beings created with great power and glory and all sorts of stuff, and were meant to help God rule the universe. But when they finally got naughty, God was like, into the abyss you go. And they were chained away in the abyss.
It's interesting.
Okay. So God does not have so I mean that's a lesson. It doesn't matter who you are. It reminds me when I've preached this in the past, the introduction I used to talk about this is, did you know that 4 of the last governors of Illinois are all in prison? They never seem to learn their lesson. 4 of the last 8 governors of Illinois are in prison, all for political
Now,
crimes.
what's her name? She needs to go too.
No, the governor of Illinois is a man.
Who is that?
You're
Oh,
thinking the mayor of
Chicago.
Chicago.
Oh, yeah, the mayor. She needs to go.
Yeah, she's different.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like you would think that they would learn their lesson, but they never seem to. So anyway, okay,
I can get away with it.
right. Even though these other guys did, but I'll get away.
You're better than that. Okay,
Right.
cool.
Okay, last one. Verse 7, the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. Right? Okay, so that's Genesis chapter 19. Way later. Right? Okay, so this is after Abraham, right? And Abraham's in the, if you remember kind of the prelude to this story, Abraham, when he comes from Ur of the Chaldees, he brings his nephew Lot with him. Okay, and Lot's kind of a pain in the butt. And they both are doing really well, okay? And so finally, Abraham says, there's trouble between their herdsmen. And Abraham says to Lot, he says, look, bro, our families have got, our clans have gotten so big, we need to just kind of separate a little bit so our guys don't, blah, blah, blah. And so he says, look, if you go toward the plains, I'll go toward the mountains. If you go to whatever, I don't care, you just pick. So Lot goes, it looks toward the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And he goes, it looks really nice down there. I'll go that way. So off he goes, ends up living in Sodom. And that's where we find him in Genesis 19, right? God comes to Abraham, if you recall, and he says, you know, I've been watching Sodom, Gomorrah. They're really naughty people. And so I'm going to nuke them.
Mhm.
And Abraham says, well, because now Abraham knows his son Lot, or his nephew Lot lives down in Sodom, right? And he says, well, what if there's 10 righteous people? I mean, would you destroy them all? Okay. Just for 10 righteous people? And God said, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. And Abraham's like, okay, well, what if there's only 5? Would you still kill the righteous with the way? No, I wouldn't even do that. And I don't remember, I haven't read the story recently because Genesis was back in the beginning of the year. But he might even get down to 1 or 2 or something. He might get down to 1, right? God's like, no, I won't do no. Because I think Abraham's thinking, well, my nephew Lot's righteous. See, but what the story actually hinges on is the fact that Lot is completely been sucked into the culture of Sodom. And he is not righteous, not even in the slightest. And so you think about this.
He offers his daughters.
Right, because these angels of God, right? They go and they go find Lot in the city square, and Lot's like, "Oh, you should come hang out at my house." They're like, "No, we like the square here. We're gonna hang out." And he's like, "No, you better come to my house." So Lot knows what, right? They go in the house, and pretty soon the men in the city are beating on the door, and they're like, "Hey, you better send those strangers out so we can have a little gang rape session." Right? And here's where you start to get the idea that Lot's not very righteous, because you know the story's written. At first you think he gets him like, oh, Lot must be a pretty good guy. He's like, look, I got these virgin daughters. I'll give you them. Just leave my guests alone, because hospitality is a big deal, right? And the guys are like, no, this is, So that now we understand Lot's not righteous. There is no righteous man left in Sodom anymore. And so, because he's willing to sacrifice his daughters, and then when the angels are like, we got to go, because God's going to destroy this place. And Lot's like, well, maybe I should. And they're like, you got to go now, right? And even Lot's wife, they're like, just go, don't look back, just go. And Lot's like, oh, his wife looks back, right? Just turn your pillar of salt, blah, blah, blah. Okay, because God nukes the city and all that, right? Okay. And we realize that the only reason Lot's rescued even is because of Abraham.
Right.
Because he's not a righteous man.
That's grace.
Right. He's far from it. And in fact, his daughters are not righteous because they go live in the mountains, and what do his daughters do? Get him drunk, and they have a little incestuous whatchamajinger there. So, crazy. All right.
Must have been some really good alcohol.
Yeah. Well, they were a mess. Okay, so how does that connect to Jude? Well, remember that the false teachers, according to verse 4, pervert the grace of our God into sensuality. They claim God's grace and freedom in Christ, that they should be allowed to do whatever they want, right? Okay? And follow whatever desires they wanted. And so Sodom and Gomorrah are given as examples of you can't do that. God will judge that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And Jude uses that example because then he actually says in verse 7, okay, he says, scrolling back up here, okay, serve as an example by undergoing a punishment of eternal fire, because God nukes Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, so they become an example, right? They're the idea of them being burned to the ground. It's meant to remind us of the eternal punishment of fire when God judges, that there's eternal punishment for sin. So what's the lesson here? Remember the first lesson was what? Lesson Israel was?
God will punish you no matter who you are.
No, that's the lesson of the angels.
Oh, sorry.
Lesson of Israel was God's wrath's got limits, right? He's got limits.
He's got limits.
You can only push him so far. Grace and mercy have a limit.
Mhm.
Second one with the angels is doesn't matter who you are. You can be the most powerful angels in the universe. God's like, yeah, whatever. Off you go. What's the lesson here?
It's forever.
Yeah. Sin has eternal consequences. It's forever. Punishment is real. God needs to be feared because there is eternal punishment for sin. This is something that has lost. I mean, you just don't hear about this anymore.
No.
You barely hear about the wrath of God. Okay? You almost never hear about the consequences of sin, that there is eternal punishment. Pretty much that idea has gone out of, out of the existence in American evangelical. Well, but even you don't. When was the last time? We don't tend to say very often, talk very often about the fact that rejecting Christ and living a life of sin will result in eternal hell.
Mhm.
And that's just not me talking. I copied into my notes 4 verses where Jesus himself talks about it. Matthew 10:28. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Matthew 25:41. Then he'll say to those on his left, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Wow, that doesn't sound fun. If Mark 9:43, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It's better to go into life crippled than with 2 hands and go to hell, to the unquenchable fire. Luke 12:15, I will warn you whom to fear. Fear him who after he is killed has authority to cast into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. That's Jesus talking. That's not me making stuff up.
It's just so easy to get on just like you were saying before. It's so easy to, oh, he won't hurt us. He's a good God and he's not that mean. And obviously they just never read the Bible. You have to read the Bible.
Well, and people say, oh, there's other ways to get to heaven.
You haven't read the Bible.
No. And people nowadays are getting really perverted, just like Sodom and Gomorrah.
People have always been really perverted, Mom.
Well, yeah, but I mean.
There's never been a period in history where people have not been really perverted.
But Satan is really good at presenting only half truths to the world.
Right.
That's how the original sin.
Yes.
I mean, surely God didn't say this.
You won't really die.
He ain't really gonna send you to hell.
Right. That's the thing.
Mhm.
And we don't.
You were born a homosexual. Don't let anybody tell you God wasn't gonna send them kids to hell. They were born that way.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, so 3 lessons. Lesson to Israel is
God has wrath.
God's wrath. There's limits. There's limits to how far God's grace and mercy will go, and he has wrath. Lesson of the angels is it doesn't matter who you are,
You still get punished.
right? You can still be punished. Lesson of Sodom and Gomorrah is the punishment is real and it's forever.
Wow.
Eternal. Questions?
Scary. If you're not a Christian.
Any questions?
I think it's self-explanatory.
I think I'm making a mess.
I'm glad we got on the rabbit trail.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot more we could talk about with that.
It doesn't say in Jude, it says, and the angels who did not stay within their own authority, they're in eternal chains and in gloomy darkness. But it doesn't say that they're in hell.
No, they're not in
No,
hell.
not
They're in this place called the abyss.
Yeah.
Right, because that's in the book of Revelation. Because they will be released. And that's what Peter says also in 1 Peter 3. That they
Exactly
were,
is the abyss.
where?
Dark place.
Yeah.
Oh, where is
We
it?
don't know.
Don't know, some spiritual place of
Not good.
imprisonment for them.
That God prepared for them.
Yeah, I'm not sure place is a good word to
So
use
is it
there.
possible that they're just floating around and they're locked out of human possession? And
Well,
they have to
they're
watch the world pass by?
well, apparently, I mean, I don't think they're probably watching the world pass by because they're locked in gloomy darkness.
Yeah.
So they're just off somewhere, you know.
That's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. but they'll be released
at the end of time,
at the end of time.
to
So-
run rampant on the earth.
Yeah, for a short time. All right, I'm gonna turn off the video. Bye, YouTube people. And